Yom Hashoah for followers of Yeshua. As a Jew, I'd like to share with you the significance of Yom Hashoah. Yom Hashoah, also known as Holocaust Remembrance Day, is a day of solemn reflection and commemoration for the 6 million Jews who were murdered during the Holocaust. Yom Hashoah falls on the 27th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan, which typically falls in April or May. It is a day to remember the atrocities committed against our people and to honor the memory of those who perished. Holocaust, or in Hebrew, Shoah, means catastrophe in Hebrew. During World War II, Nazi Germany and its allies killed 6 million Jewish men, women, and children, as well as millions of other people, as part of a state-sponsored plan. The Germans said this was the final solution to the Jewish question. In the years right after they were freed, Jews who spoke Yiddish and survivors called the killing of Jews the Hurban. This is the same word that was used to talk about the destruction of the first temple in Yerushalayim by the Babylonians in 586 BCE, and the destruction of the second temple by the Romans in 70 CE. Shoah, which means catastrophe, is the word that Israelis and the French use. The word Holocaust comes from the Greek word holocauston, which is a translation of the Hebrew word olah, which means an offering that is burned and given to God in its entirety. This word was chosen because in the last step of the Nazis' plan to kill people, the execution camps, the victims' bodies were burned up in crematoriums and open fires. As followers of Yeshua, Yom Hashoah is also an important day for us to observe, whether Jewish or not. The teachings of Yeshua are rooted in love, compassion, and justice, and the Holocaust was a time when these values were gravely absent. The persecution and murder of millions of innocent people, including 6 million Jews, is a reminder of the terrible consequences that can arise from prejudice and hatred. Moreover, it is important to remember that the Holocaust did not happen in a vacuum. Anti-Semitism has been a persistent problem throughout history, and it is still a significant issue today. It is important to recognize the harm that can be caused by intolerance and to work towards creating a world where all people are valued and respected. Yeshua himself was a Jew. He was not a Christian. The Jewish people are part of his family, even those who did not know him. He taught his followers to love their neighbors as themselves. Yom Hashoah provides an opportunity for us to reflect on these teachings and to renew our commitment to building a more just and compassionate world. Professor Kai Keher Hansen has written about the Jewish groups in Drashes, a small town in the part of the Czech Republic that was controlled by Germany. Drashes was a community and concentration camp for Jews during the war. Here's part of what Keher Hansen said. From the end of 1941 to the beginning of 1945, more than 140,000 Jews were sent to this ghetto, which for many, about 88,000, became a transit camp to the death camp Auschwitz-Birkenau. Approximately 33,000 died in this ghetto. When it was all over and the ghetto had been liberated on May 8, 1945, there were about 19,000 survivors. Among those who died in Drashes or were deported from Drashes to the death camp Auschwitz or survived the horrors in Drashes were individuals who were Christians of Jewish descent. It is tempting today to call them Messianic Jews, but this would not correspond with their self-perception. Like most other Jews in Germany, they saw themselves as Germans. Unlike most other German Jews, they were Jews who had embraced the Christian faith, some by conviction, others for pragmatic reasons. But in Drashes, they shared the faith of Mosaic Jews. In the eyes of the Nazis, their Christian faith did not obliterate their Jewishness. On February 10th, 1944, Hans Werner Hirschberg arrived in Drashes. He lived and wrote later. 1/10 of the Jews who had been interned there belonged to a Christian confession. Some were Protestants, some Catholics. Among these Jews, there was a group of evangelical Jewish Christians from Holland, 400 in number, that distinguished themselves. They even had a Jewish Christian pastor with them. Many of our church members had, although they had been baptized, never really considered being followers of Jesus until they came to Torah-observant. But here, under the influence of God's Word, many of them were truly converted. Jews who had been Christians in name only became true Christians. Many Mosaic Jews and Jews who had no faith whatsoever found Jesus and were saved in Torah-observant. I am one of the few survivors from the concentration camp in Torah-observant. Most of my brothers went home to be with the Lord, but my Savior saved me out of this camp so that I might proclaim the wonderful things He performed among those who were in the valley of the shadow of death. Arthur Goldschmidt's parents had converted to Christianity in 1858, after Goldschmidt, born in 1873, had to resign his post as a judge in Hamburg in 1933. He devoted himself to his hobby as a painter. His wife Kitty, who was a baptized Jew, died in June 1942. 1 month later, Goldschmidt was deported to Torah-observant. Here he founded an evangelical congregation where he preached and administered pastoral care. He survived in the ghetto. Before his death on February 9, 1947, he wrote down an account of the evangelical congregation in Torah-observant. Here are a few glimpses from the account, which was published in 1948. On the first day in the ghetto, Goldschmidt and another man get together in an attic and read the New Testament, which he has brought. The word gets about, and others join them the following Sundays. No more than 20 persons can assemble without permission. What was I to do? He realizes that the administration was not likely to appreciate the formation of a Christian congregation in a Jewish town, and without the consent of the Jewish Council of Elders, he could not proceed. Goldschmidt continues, "So I turned nonetheless to Mr. Edelstein, who was then the leader of the Jewish Council, and described the state of affairs to him. When he was informed of the fact that an evangelical congregation had already been founded, he was astonished, but also full of understanding. The good God is ultimately the same, and to him, Edelstein, it is the same in which way he is honored. Both sides realize that the room where the Mosaic Jews worship cannot be used. On October 18, 1942, they get the first and semi-official recognition of the congregation as a room with electrical light, used as a variety theater, and a lecture hall is made available for them by the Council of Elders, and the congregation grows. Between 150 and 200 attend the services. At the festivals, there are even more. Goldschmidt does not hide that. From time to time, there were some difficulties with the Council of Elders, but the following words are nevertheless remarkable. In retrospect, it must be admitted that this administration of what was intended as a pure Jewish society, which naturally would see a Christian congregation as a foreign body, in general has been very obliging. Here is an example. Christian German Jews cannot celebrate Christmas without a Christmas tree, which is difficult to come by. Again, in Goldschmidt's words, finally the SS permitted us to have a small tree which would be decorated by the women, not even candles. A much desired rarity donated from all sides were missing. But then listen to how Goldschmidt continues. The last year the Christmas tree was cynically forbidden by the SS man who had to make the decision. But then, fortunately, the Jewish administration saw to it that an artificial tree with inserted branches and with multicolored electrical lamps was made for the service. Torah-observant shows what happened to Jewish followers of Yeshua during the Holocaust. 10% or more of the Jews in Nazi Germany may have believed that Yeshua was the Jewish Messiah, and they had to go through pain and die with their fellow Jews regardless. This was not about religion. This was about intolerance, racism, anti-Semitism, and baseless hatred. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy. Psalms 137, verses 5 and 6. This quote from Psalms 137, which is traditionally recited during Jewish mourning rituals, highlights the importance of memory in Jewish tradition. The Holocaust represents a profound loss for the Jewish people, and this loss is compounded by the fact that many of the victims were denied the dignity of a proper burial or commemoration. By remembering the Holocaust, we honor the memory of those who were lost and work to ensure that their suffering is not forgotten. In every generation, one is obligated to regard oneself as if he or she had come out of Egypt. The Haggadah. This quote from the Haggadah, the text that is traditionally read during the Jewish holiday of Passover, speaks to the idea that the Jewish people must always remember their history of oppression and liberation. The Holocaust represents a particularly painful chapter in this history, and it is incumbent upon us to remember it so that we can work to prevent similar atrocities from occurring in the future. Even converts to Judaism are tied to Jewish history as well as Jewish destiny. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Rabbi Avraham Joshua Heschel. This quote from Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel speaks to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. The Jewish people have faced many challenges throughout history, and the Holocaust represents perhaps the greatest of these challenges. Despite the unimaginable horror of the Holocaust, many Jews were able to rebuild their lives and communities in its aftermath. The birth of the nation of Israel was partly fueled by the fires of the Holocaust. The Holocaust did not begin with killing. It began with words. Steven Spielberg. This quote highlights the role that hate speech and propaganda played in the lead up to the Holocaust. It serves as a reminder to the importance of combating lies, hate speech, and intolerance. It also reminds us that the majority is often wrong, especially when influenced by mainstream media. Even the school system was used to influence the youth to believe that the murder of Jews was justified. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Pastor Martin Niemöller. This powerful quote from Pastor Martin Niemöller highlights the dangers of apathy and complacency in the face of injustice. The Holocaust was made possible in part because many individuals and governments chose to turn a blind eye to the persecution of the Jewish people. Niemöller's words remind us that by failing to speak out against oppression and discrimination, we risk becoming complicit in the suffering of others. Thou shalt not be a victim, thou shalt not be a perpetrator, but above all, thou shalt not be a bystander. Yehuda Bauer. This quote from historian and Holocaust scholar Yehuda Bauer reminds us of the importance of taking action in the face of injustice. In closing, I urge you to take a moment on Yom Hashoah to remember the 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust, and to recommit ourselves to the values of love, compassion, and justice that are at the heart of the Jewish faith, which was the faith of Yeshua. May we work together to ensure that such atrocities are never repeated.